Roberto Baggio, Marco van Basten, Denis Bergkamp, Hristo Stoichkov, Eric Cantona. If you've ever wanted to manage any of these legendary players on Football Manager, well, now you can with the incredible 1992-93 database for Football Manager 2022 by The Mad Scientist. Hello everyone and welcome. This is Anderzbaz FM and my name is Anderz, and I hope that this video finds you incredibly well. Today I am taking a sneak peek, a first look at the brand new 92-93 database for FM22. The database is created by the fantastic Mad Scientist and will see its full release on Thursday, March 24th. Now, I've had the pleasure of getting my hands on the beta version of this database over the last couple of days, and I don't have a good enough vocabulary to explain how awesome it is to manage so many incredibly legendary players from my youth. Shall we take a proper look? In the beta version and the initial full release, there are 8 playable leagues. These are across 6 nations and they include the top 2 divisions for both Italy and England, along with the top flights of Spain, France, Germany and Scotland. Now, I know that the Mad Scientist is working tirelessly to add more leagues in the future, so be sure to follow along for updates, and I'll make sure that all of his links, so his Twitter, his Twitch, his Patreon, everything is linked down in the description below, so you won't miss the full release. I'll put that, in fact, I'll put a link to the full release down there as well once it is out. But any further updates, make sure you are following him so you see them as and when they come out. But today, I'm going to take you around each of the 6 playable nations and give my personal thoughts on who I think would be a good team to manage and who will be challenging for the title in each of those top divisions. Now, we'll start out by looking at the brand new Premier League in England. It's its debut season. Gone is the old First Division. Now we are in the era of the Premier League, obviously 30 years ago. And now, important to note, there are 22 teams in the top flight still at this point, because that didn't reduce to 20 until the 95-96 season. But among those 22 teams, you'll see plenty of familiar teams as well. Maybe a few unfamiliar teams if you aren't well versed in your early 90s Premier League football. So Oldham, for example, are in there, the likes of Coventry, and plenty of other. Well, there's 22 teams in total. I'm sure one of them will be your favourites. Now, the defending champions of England are Leeds United, who won the final season of the old First Division under the guidance of Howard Wilkinson. And if you manage to keep Eric Cantona at Leeds, you might just be able to fight for the title once again. But the squad is there's a mix of ageing players like Gordon Strachan and youth players like David Batty, who, if you can keep them all together, will probably get you through a couple of seasons before a big rebuild and retooling for the future is needed. But they are a team who, in the real world, fared really poorly. I think they finished 17th. The lowest a defending champion has ever finished in the Premier League, and one of the lowest ever in England. But I think if you can keep Cantona at Leeds, you will do really, really well and be a challenger for the title. And speaking of the title, I don't think I can go much further than to mention Manchester United. Now, they are obviously still without a league title since Matt Busby left the club in the late 60s. But if you know your history, which I'm sure you do if you're looking at this database, it shows that they would become the dominant force in English football for years and decades to come under Sir Alex Ferguson. But that could all change with you at the helm of a different club. But if you do choose to manage Man United, you're going to find an incredible squad of players. And don't forget to check out the youth teams as well, because there's going to be a ton of youth prospects. The class of 92, let's not forget, this is 1992, that are going to keep the success flowing for years and years to come at the club. So outside of the defending champions and the title favourites, there are a number of other clubs with an outside shot at the title. And that includes the likes of the real-world runners-up Aston Villa, unlikely pace-setters Norwich City, who managed to qualify for Europe and then in the following season did the unthinkable and beat Bayern Munich, and my personal favourites, newly promoted, big spenders, Blackburn Rovers. Now, if you can keep Alan Shearer off the injury bench, you're going to have a great season. An injury-free season for Shearer will be a great foundation for an early title challenge. Obviously, this is the club that within 2 seasons, so they finished 4th in 92-93, 2nd in 93-94 and then won the Premier League at the third attempt in 94-95. Now, if you can do that and you can keep Shearer injury-free and sign a few extra players, maybe you can challenge for the title a little bit earlier than Blackburn did in the real world. Now, before we move on, I would just like to take this opportunity to ask you to subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying this video, and also to please give this video a like as well so that the YouTube algorithm can work its magic and get this video out to a wider audience. I'd also like to announce that I'll be starting a new save here on YouTube alongside my my current day Blackburn Rovers save. Once the full version of this database has been released, I'm going to start a game in the Premier League, so look out for a whole new ball game coming in the next week or so. But back down to business, and we'll jump now over to Italy and to Serie A, where there are a number of immensely strong teams and plenty of players whose names you will recognise. Now, I think Serie A at this point in time is the strongest division that you're going to get your hands on. There are so many teams that are really going to be in the title hunt or have got incredible stories that you could follow along with and make your own. Now, we're going to start with Marco van Basten, who is still leading the charge for AC Milan. And you have the opportunity here to prolong his career because the injuries that led to his retirement ultimately are yet to happen. Milan are the defending champions and ultimately won the title again in the 92-93 season. But elsewhere, there are a lot of intriguing stories. So if you don't want to manage the best team in the country with lots and lots of star players, maybe you'd like to join Paul Gascoigne at Lazio. Or you could rescue an ailing Napoli side who, just 3 seasons ago, won the Serie A title. But they are struggling after the departure of Diego Maradona, club legend, who has gone off to Spain. We'll cover them in a second. But maybe Napoli are a side you'd like to rebuild and get back into the title hunt. Or maybe you'd like to get your hands on, perhaps, in my opinion at least, the best player in this database at this time, and that is Roberto Baggio at Juventus. Now, the old lady in the real world struggled a little bit in the league. I think they've ultimately finished 4th, but they did go on to win the UEFA Cup this season. They did eventually finish behind Milan and 2 other teams that I've yet to mention in Internazionale and Parma, who are both really intriguing as well. Have a look at their squads before you start a game. They're both really strong squads. It highlights the strength of depth here in Italy. And there are, 7, 8 teams who are really... I'm not even talking about Fiorentina yet. They've got a very young Battistuta. There are so many options in Italy for a good save. Now, if you're wanting a really competitive season, I would suggest giving the 92-93 Serie A campaign a try. Now, we aren't finished yet, and if we head over to Spain, there's no real great surprise who features at the top of the list of teams in La Liga, with perennial title rivals Barcelona and Real Madrid battling it out over the title and housing most of the best talent in the country at the time. Now, you can't really look any further than Barcelona and Johan Cruyff's dream team, who won the Liga on the final day in the previous season, and in fact in the 92-93 season they won it on the final day as well, and they also won the previous European Cup, the final European Cup, before it was rebranded to the Champions League. Now, there is an impressive lineup here at Barcelona. You've got the likes of Pep Guardiola, Ronald Koeman, Michael Laudrup, Hristo Stoichkov. In fact, it is really a dream team. You probably won't see a collection of players as good as this anywhere unless you do it yourself. And they would eventually go on to win 4 consecutive titles in Spain. But the Real Madrid side itself is not to be sniffed at either. They might not have the household names that you can immediately pick out at Barcelona, but there are so many good players at Real Madrid as well. And there's a young Raul in the youth system who will definitely be one to keep an eye on. So don't discount Real Madrid if you're looking at Spain. And elsewhere, there's other options as well. So I've already talked about Diego Maradona. He is now at Sevilla, so maybe you'd want to guide him during his swan song, or maybe you fancy the goal machine. I think Bebeto at Deportivo La Coruña got 29 goals in this season, so maybe you want to score lots of goals with Bebeto. There are options. There are lots of options in Spain. Probably not as many as Italy if you want an immediate title challenge, but there are options outside of the biggest 2 clubs. Over in France, we are in the midst of a spell of domination for Marseille, which only really ended due to them being embroiled in a match-fixing scandal, which saw the ultimate winners of the renamed Champions League being stripped of the French title that they'd won and ultimately relegated down to the 2nd tier after a couple of seasons. Now, obviously, you won't do any match-fixing, you might do some save scumming, but probably avoid that. But what happened was they basically paid off the team who they were facing in one of their final games of the League 1 season, so they could keep fresh for the Champions League final. Because obviously they'd lost the Champions League or the European Cup, obviously 2 seasons prior. They lost in the final, so they wanted to avoid that ultimately by nefarious means. But you've got young captain Didier Deschamps leading the way, and he's poised to lead Marseille to glory once again. And if you can avoid that scandal, which you probably will, and keep that good young core together, you could probably dominate in France for many years to come. The other side, obviously, we'd like to mention PSG. Long before their current riches, they were still owned by Canal Plus, so they're not poor by any means. They're still a strong side. They obviously finished second in this season in the real world, and I believe they won the following season, which was only their second ever French title. They're probably the closest challengers for the title, but my personal pick would be head down to the south coast and to the Principality of Monaco to manage a certain Jurgen Klinsmann, who is still in France at this point. He's not gone over to Spurs, obviously, where he heads in a couple of seasons' time. But the German striker is incredible, so he's definitely one I'd like to manage. And if you look in the youth team at Monaco, you might find a very fresh face, 14-year-old Thierry Henry, who obviously you want to keep an eye on as well. And if we're going to speak of the German striker Klinsmann, let's now is as good a time as any to head over to the Bundesliga, where a surprise, possibly if you're not familiar with early 90s German football, which I'm not massively, let's be fair, Werder Bremen won out in a very competitive season. Now, speaking of German football, I know that the national team was at its very best at this point. They'd won the World Cup in 1990. They'd got to the final of Euro 92. They had a really good, strong World Cup 94. They've got a good, strong national team, but domestically, none of those, very few of those players are playing in the domestic system. They're all out and about across Europe. So that Bremen side, it's clearly good. They won the league. But honestly, personally, I don't know any of the names. They don't immediately jump out at me as recognisable. Now, a name that I definitely do recognise is leading their nearest challengers, Bayern Munich, and that is World Cup winning captain Lothar Matthäus. Now, there's an unsurprisingly strong Bayern side behind him, so they are obviously a good option. They've had a couple of seasons where they've not won the Bundesliga. I think it's 2, maybe 3 seasons where they're going through a bit of a drought. But as you get towards the late 90s, into the 2000s, that Bayern side obviously became really strong, and now it's a dynasty that's been going on for decades. So if you can do that a bit earlier with Bayern, you could really dominate German football. But maybe you'd like to do something a little bit different. Maybe you'd like to crack some crossbars so you can manage Eintracht Frankfurt and get Tony Yeboah. Obviously, he hits a lot of crossbars and scores some screamers at Leeds. So maybe you want to do that in Germany. But my personal favourite idea is to take the only remaining East German side. So when the East and West Germany unified in the early 90s, the Bundesligas joined together. The main West German Bundesliga was extended by a couple of teams. Both Dynamo Dresden, who I'm talking about, and Hansa Rostock came over from the East German side of things. But Rostock have been relegated. So Dynamo Dresden are the only remaining former East German side. So my challenge to you is to take them from essentially the bottom half of the Bundesliga. They didn't really survive very well, and attempt to lead them to glory in a now unified Germany. And if you can do that with just domestic players, that would be even better. Now, the final country that we need to visit on our list is Scotland. And obviously, you're immediately thinking of the old firm of Rangers and Celtic, but only one of those teams is any good at the moment. And I say that relatively speaking. Obviously, Celtic are still a good side by Scottish standards, but not by Rangers standards at the moment, because we find ourselves in the middle of the Rangers variant of the 9 in a row. So Celtic won 9 in a row back in the 70s, I believe. Rangers are in the middle of their 9 in a row now. Celtic won 9 in a row again in a decade or two's time when Rangers went south. But this Rangers squad is a who's who, an array of big names from this era of Scottish football. There's Andy Gorham in goal, but of course the goals of Ali McCoist are key. I think he nearly got 50 in this season. I think it was 48 or 49, if I recall correctly. But Rangers are easily the best side in Scotland. And Celtic weren't even the nearest challengers. They were in the middle of a relative slump. I don't think they finished second for a couple of years in a row. But it's Aberdeen who would get closest in a fruitless effort to stop Rangers from taking their 5th of 9 in this run. Consecutive title. So really you've got to look outside Rangers unless you want a really easy game in Scotland. Aberdeen would be a good one. Rebuilding Celtic could also be fun. But I'll leave that one up to you. And that is where we have to end today's video. There we have it. A whistle-stop tour around the absolutely fantastic 1992-93 database, once again, by the Mad Scientist. I've barely scratched the surface. There's so many hidden gems for you to find and get your hands on once you start playing through this. Now, obviously, I've just looked at the database. I've not installed the logo pack yet. There's a face pack as well that's coming out with the full release. It's going to be all immersive, and I would recommend you downloading everything you can and keeping your eyes on the Mad Scientist to make sure you get all the updates as well. I'm sure there will be more leagues being released as we get further into the release of this incredible database, and I'd like to give a massive thanks to him for letting me do this video today, for letting me get access to the beta. Obviously, you can get access to the beta early now via his Patreon from just as little as £1 a month. Obviously, you can wait until the full release comes out, but I'd really urge you to support him, because the amount of work that's been put into this database is unreal. I think it's nearly 100 days in the editor since the release is just incredible. I think it's about 85 or something like that. I did read what he said on his Patreon, on his stats that he'd put in. So it's incredible. There's over 1 million changes to the database. Just support this guy. He has put in a fantastic amount of work, and the database really, really shows. It's incredible. I'd urge you to play it, and play it relentlessly. So thank you anyway. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Remember, there'll be a series based on this database coming soon. I'm not sure who I'm going to manage yet in the Premier League, but I'm looking forward to managing from the start of the Premier League. We'll do a few seasons in that save and see how things develop. And there we go. That is it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Well, hey, you've made it to the end of the video, and hang on, it's a subscribe button. Tap on this. Even if you've done it already, just try it, see what happens. And then if you're hanging around, have a look. Have a look at these. One of these. Check out some of this amazing content. You won't regret it. I'll see you next time.